Good day. You're all welcome once again to another session of our tutorials. My name is Matthew, and then I've been the one taking you through the tutorials all this while. Please, if you are watching this video, kindly subscribe, comment, and share. Please, do not finish watching this video without subscribing. It's very, very important. It's a subscription that will determine whether our services are going to be improved. So please, if you have been blessed, and then if this session or these videos has been beneficial to you, kindly try to subscribe. Of late, I've noticed that the number of views are more than the number of subscription. But thank you for those who view the videos, but then viewing alone will not do us any good. Kindly try and subscribe to this channel. Thank you. So, for some time now, we've been talking about some of the theories or the theoretical discipline of sociology. We've spoken about some of the ideas from the symbolic interactionism, phenomenology, and ethnology. We've also spoken about some of the ideas in the functionalist perspective. We've spoken about the critical theory, but this session is solely going to be based on the neo-Marxism, another form of the neo-Marxism. And then the theorists are going to focus, or we are going to pay much attention, is Ralf Dharendorf. Ralf Dharendorf is one of the theorists whose ideas have shaped the conflict theory. Ralf Dharendorf is one of the theories who has been ideas of Karl Marx. That you could see that there are some of the ideas of Ralf Dharendorf that are in the way agrees with such of Karl Marx. But then there could be, or there are some situations that Ralf Dharendorf actually argued with what Karl Marx, that he did not agree with some of the ideas of Karl Marx. So, without wasting much time, we are diving into some of the conflict ideas of Ralf Dharendorf. Now, Ralf Dharendorf, his ideas of conflict was based on the primacy of power and inevitability of conflict. And then another one was the major determinants of conflict. So these are the two premises based on which Ralf Dharendorf argued his theory of conflict. So his idea was firstly based on the primacy of power and inevitability of conflict. That according to Ralf Dharendorf, conflict happens in groups, or conflict does not happen as a result of the means of production. But then conflict happens because there is exercise of power by one group, and then there's another group that do not have that power, and as a result, they fight against the power to change the social structure. So he said that there's a primacy of power, the exercise of power, and then the inevitability of conflict. The inevitability of conflict actually means that conflict in a way is functional for the social progress. That as human beings, we cannot conflict, because conflict is functional for social progress. According to Ralf Dharendorf, his idea was also based on some of the major determinants of conflict in industries, especially. So you could see that Ralf Dharendorf, in a way, he based his idea of conflict based on conflict in industries, conflict in organized groups. How are conflicts in organized group managed? So he saw conflict as being the function of the inequality in the exercise of power. So that was the main premises of the argument of Dharendorf when it comes to with his idea of conflict. So now the primacy of power and then inevitability of conflict. Now, Ralf Dharendorf, his definition of power was the same as that of Max Weber. Now, Ralf Dharendorf defined power as the ability to realize one's goal and objective even in the presence of opposition. That power is not only limited to the physical, but even to the extent of controlling the psychological ideas of other people also is a form of power. And he said that conflict comes as a result of groups with different interests. Those who exercise power for their own interests and those who do not have power but fight against those who have power to change the social structure. As Dharendorf also spoke about norms, that he actually disagreed with the functionalist ideas that group norms are consensus norms. That group norms, the norms that govern society, are the norms that every human in the society or every individual in the society has consented to. His argument was that there is no norms other than the norms that are supposed or that controls human beings. So Ralf Dharendorf also spoke concerning group norms. His argument was against the ideas of functionalists that social norms are formed based on consensus. He contended that social norms are nothing but ruling norms. That he could see that in a contemporary world, those who rule, those who have power, who exercise power in the society, are the ones that determines the kind of life that we are to live. They are the ones that determines the behavior that is acceptable and the ones that is not acceptable. They are the ones that determines that you must pass through formal education in order to become a lawyer. The ruling norms. And as a result, they are using that to exploit us. They are the ones that have determined that before you can work as a bank manager, you must have a degree in banking and finance. Or you must have a degree in the finance sector or a degree in accounting. They are the ones that has determined the accepted norms and the unaccepted norms or the unaccepted way of behaving. So Ralf Dharendorf also saw norms as a basis of social stratification. That it is as a result of the group norms that we classify other people as those who are part of the higher hierarchy, and we classify other people as those who are part of the middle class. And it's because of the social norms that we are able to classify people as part of the lower class. So norms in a way determines the social or form the basis of social stratification. Major determinants of conflict. Conflict is determined when there is a high level of superimposition. We will touch more on superimposition as we dive deeper. Now, conflict is determined when there is a high level of superimposition between the authority distribution. So according to Ralf Dharendorf, his major determinant of conflict is as a result of authority distribution, a situation whereby there is high level of hierarchy, a situation whereby control has been given to other people, whereby other people has been given the power and that audacity to control other people. That is when conflict is being determined. That human beings, in a way, we have the nature of not being ruled by other people. That in a situation whereby there's a high level of superimposition between authority distribution, that wherever that we go, we find ourselves to be ruled and controlled by other people. That is when conflict is going to be determined. But with this idea of authority distribution, Ralf Dharendorf actually disagreed with Karl Marx's idea of conflict being determined by economic interest. According to Karl Marx, it is the economic interest, that is those who own the means of production and those who sell their labor, are the ones that actually determine the conflict in the society. But Ralf Dharendorf actually said that it is the authority distribution, especially in organized groups, in industries, that determines conflicts. And also being dichotomous. That is what I've spoken about. That a situation whereby in industries, other people are being favored than other people. So being dichotomous means that the conflict comes between two groups and only two conflict groups. That where the people are treated fairly, in the organization, other people are not treated fairly. So these are the major determinants of conflict in industries. But however, mechanism has been developed to regulate conflicts, thereby reducing the chance of a revolution, just as Karl Marx envisioned. That according to Karl Marx, that when the proletariat become conscious of their class, then they will embark on a revolution. That would, in a way, bring a different form of economic orientation. But then, Dharendorf is trying to make us understand that the reason why the revolution that Karl Marx envisioned has not yet been materialized is because there has been some kind of mechanism that has been developed to regulate how conflict is to be exercised. For example, we can see the collective bargaining. That we know that the collective bargaining is an avenue, it's a system that has been created for the woes of the trade unions and the employers to be settled. And as a result, since there has been some mechanism that develops or that has been developed to regulate conflict, as a result, reduces the chance of a revolution that is to come. That in a situation whereby you think that you must be given more salary, the trade unions, they will negotiate with the employers, or they will negotiate with the management of the business. And then a consensus will be reached whereby the interest of the subordinate class, the interest of the workers are going to be taken into consideration. So according to Ralf Dharendorf, this actually contributes to one of the main reasons why the revolution, that the almighty revolution that Karl Marx envisioned, has not yet been materialized. So, just as I said earlier, that Ralf Dharendorf, he based his idea of conflict on what? Conflict in industries, conflict in organized groups. That he said that conflict is inevitable because of the different interest group. That you see that in organized group, in industries, we have those that exercise power, and then we have those that do not exercise power. So because we have different form of interest group, we have different form of interest groups. That is when conflict is being determined. That one thing we need to know, that there's a difference between interest group and a quasi group. There's a difference between interest group and a quasi group. When you talk about interest group, we are talking about an organized form of groups. A group whose interest is manifest. A group who has what? A group charter. When we talk about a group charter, we are talking about the views, the ideologies, the objectives, that controls the movement and the activities of a group. That it is the group charter that determines whether the group charter that determines that a group is has a manifest interest. And according to Ralf Dharendorf, it is only when people's interest or the interest of people become manifest that there is going to be conflict. that interest group are the main bases, are the main causes of conflict in the society. According to Ralf Dharendorf, in the modern industry, control is very, very important than ownership. According to him, control actually causes more conflict, or actually lead to conflict, than ownership. Now, in the modern industry, we have what we call separate legal entity. When we talk about separate legal entity, we are talking about the fact that the management of the business is different from its owners. That is when you could see that in modern industries, we have shareholders who are actually the owners of businesses, and then we have the management, the board of directors, who are appointed by by the shareholders. As soon as the board of directors are appointed by the shareholders, there's some sort of power that has been given to the board of directors to exercise control, to exercise power in the daily management of the business. And then it is the way that this board of directors exercise the power that will determine whether conflict is going to happen in industries. So according to Ralf Dharendorf, control is more important than ownership. But you could see that for Karl Marx, he actually emphasized more on ownership as compared to control. But Ralf Dharendorf is of the idea that control, those who have been given the power, or those who have been given the ability to exercise power in the modern industry, in a way contribute to conflict. That the way whereby the board of directors are going to exercise that power will determine whether conflict is going to come or not. So that is Ralf Dharendorf's idea of conflict in industries, that we have different conflict groups or different interest groups. And we talk about interest groups, we are talking about those whose interests are manifest, those who are aware of their interests. Those are the interest groups that we are talking about. But then a quasi group could be just any just a collection of a collection of people. For example, a group of doctors may not necessarily be quasi group, may not necessarily be interest groups. But then, one thing that we need to understand is that quasi group actually gives birth to interest group. It is when there is a quasi group that interest groups actually erupts. That with the example that I gave with a group of doctors. Yes, with a group of doctors, their interest is is latent. Their interest is not known. But then you could see that in the course of their activities, they have certain things in common. They have certain behaviors in common, and as a result, they are classified as quasi groups. But then, until their interests become manifest, until they become they are being driven by the same sort of ideology, until they come together to fight for a particular interest, for their interest to be manifest, they can never be classified as interest group. So we need to understand the difference between quasi group and interest group. The quasi group deals with latent interest. Now, when we talk about a latent interest is not constructed. A latent interest is not created. A latent interest is explicit or is implicit in the social structures that we find ourselves in. A latent interest is implicit in the social structures that we find ourselves in. That is latent interest. But then a manifest interest is being created. A manifest interest evolves. And then it is the premises, it is the degree of the manifest interest that will determine that will determine conflicts. The modern industry in the capitalist society. So Ralf Dharendorf actually gave us some differences, some differences in the modern industry and then the capitalist society or the capitalist world. And you could see that in the modern industry, there is increase in heterogeneity of labor forces. There is a high division of labor. There's a high division of labor forces. You could see that there's also expansion of the middle class. That just as I said, separate legal entity, the directors appointed by the shareholders in a way form part of the middle class. The MDs, the managing directors and all that, they form part of the middle class. But as compared to the capitalist world, there was nothing like what? Or there was a limited sort of what? Of the middle class. But then in the capitalist world, or in the modern industry, there's a high degree of expansion of the middle class. And also there is increase in social mobility between classes. In the modern industry, you could see that workers, they are trying as much as possible to do their masters. They are trying as much as possible to get their PhD so that they can move from one hierarchy in their organization to another. So in the modern industry, there is increase in mobility between classes. When we talk about mobility, we are talking about what? The movement from one social standard or from one social structure to another. The movement from one social class to another. And you could also see that in the modern capital or in the modern industry, there is a growth of political equality and citizenship rights. That human rights, in a way, is what is on the increase. Human rights is what is on the increase. And you can also see there is some sort of government involvement in various forms of income redistribution to promote social welfare. That you could see that government in a way charges taxes, that churches are being taxed, that in a way try as much as possible to bridge the gap between the income distribution. That the more you earn, the higher your income, the higher the taxes that are going to be charged. So all these are some of the interventions that the government is trying to put in place in order to bridge the gap between the subordinate class and the dominant class. And the establishment of institutional mechanism for reorganizing or recognizing and negotiating class conflict. That you could see that there are some sort of mechanism that has been developed in the modern industry to regulate and to resolve class conflicts. Just as I said, the collective bargaining, whereby the trade union and the employers, they meet to settle their differences. They meet in order to have a very good working environment for themselves. So these are some of the differences, some of the characteristics that differentiate modern industry from the capitalist society. The increase in heterogeneity of labor force, the expansion of the middle class, increase in social mobility between classes, the growth of political equality and citizenship rights, government involvement in various forms of income redistribution to promote social welfare, the advent of taxes, the establishment of institutional mechanisms for recognizing and negotiating class conflict issues. Now, Dharendorf also spoke about classes. Now, the identification of Dharendorf is also the same as that of Karl Marx. Karl Marx said that there is two different categories of classes. The same thing, Ralf Dharendorf also said that there is two different classes in the industry, in the industrial society. That according to him, we have the dominant class and the subordinate class. Now, when we talk about the dominant class, we are talking about those who exercise power for their own interest. And then we talk about the subordinate class, we are talking about those who do not have power to exercise. But then what they do is that they try and fight against the power or those who exercise power in order to change the social structure. Those are the two classes, the two categories of classes, according to what Ralf Dharendorf: the dominant class and the subordinate class. Then, according to Ralf Dharendorf, in as much as we have the dominant class and the subordinate class, they are being moved by their interest. Now, when we talk about interest, we are talking about the direction of the objectives and the goals of the group interest, of the objective of the group. Now, when we talk about interest, we are talking about the ideologies. We are talking about the direction of the ideologies of a group. What the group actually try to fight for. Those are the interests that we are talking about. So according to Ralf Dharendorf, we have what we call a latent interest and a manifest interest. A latent interest is when members of a group in a way are not aware of their interests. That is what I say, a crazy group. That members are unaware of their interests. Even though a crazy group, the members in a way may have some sort of similarities in terms of their behavior, but then they are not united by a common interest. They are not united by a particular direction, even though they may have some sort of similarities as they go by their daily activities. But then a crazy group in a way is characterized by a latent interest. That they are not aware, they are unaware of their interest. And then we also have what we call the manifest interest. The manifest interest is a characteristics of the interest groups. That is what I spoke about. That when the groups are aware of their interest, it is created and formed as part of the ideology that determines the common way members must behave. So the manifest interest actually give a sense of direction to the group. The manifest interest actually make the members of the group conscious of their class. The manifest interest make the members of the group conscious of their class. So according to Ralf Dharendorf, it is only when interest move from latent interest to manifest interest that there can be conflict in the society. So this means that until crazy groups become interest group, there is no way there is going to be conflict in the society. But just as I said earlier, a crazy group gives birth to what? Interest group. So a crazy group in a way is bigger than interest group. A crazy group is bigger than what? Than interest group. Now, for example of a crazy group. Let's say customers of a bank. They all, yes, they are not bound by a manifest interest. They are not bound by a common sense of direction of fighting for their particular interest. But in a way, you could see that members or customers of a bank in a way have some interest in common. They have some characteristics in common. That is, they keep their monies with the bank. But then members of a bank in a way cannot necessarily be classified as an interest group. because their interests are latent. But then, in a situation whereby you will be there, so that at that particular time, members of what of a bank will be classified as what as crazy groups. However, in a situation whereby, let's say you are a customer of a bank, and then you will receive an alert that an amount of 50,000 Ghana cedis has been credited or has been debited to your account. It means that an amount of 50,000 Ghana cedis has been subtracted from your account, has been deducted from your account. And you go to the bank to go and question the reason why such an amount has been deducted from your account. And you went to the bank and you got to realize that there are other people over there, right, who also face the same challenges. That this person is saying that me too, an amount of what 10,000 Ghana cedis has been deducted from what from my bank account. At that particular instant, an interest group is being formed. So the people will come together. The people will come together and fight for their interest. So according to Ralf Dharendorf, until an interest group is formed, until the interests of members of society become manifest, there is no way there is going to be what conflict in the society. For example, members of the Ghanaian society can be considered as a crazy group. But then, a particular group that embarks on a demonstration can be classified as interest group. For example, let's look at the demonstration that just happened when the school or there was an increment in school fees. You could see that students in the University of Ghana, in a way, are considered as what crazy group because we have certain characteristics in common. Our interest, our latent interest, is what is implicit, is situated in the structures that we find ourselves in. But then we are not going to be what all the students in the University of Ghana are not going to be considered as what as interest group, but then we are going to be considered as crazy group. But you could see that when there was an increment in school fees, some of the students gathered and they embarked on a demonstration. So at that particular instant, their interest became known, their interest became manifest, and then they were given a common sense of direction, that is making sure that the school fees are reduced. This is what we call an interest group. In that particular sense, the interest group came from the crazy group. The group of people who embarked on the demonstration came from the entire population of University of Ghana. So that is what Ralf Dharendorf, his idea about interest, that until our latent interest become manifest, that is moving from a class in itself for a class for itself, becoming conscious, class conscious, there is not going to be conflict in the society. That is Dharendorf's idea of interest. Now, let's look at some of the conditions for the creation of interest group. Some of the conditions that shift the interest of groups from latent to manifest. Number one, we have a technical condition. When we talk about a technical condition, now just as I said, that latent interest is not created. It is what? It is implicit. It is situated in the structures that the members find themselves in. But then manifest interest is the one that is created. And then until a latent interest is going to be created, there should be what we call a group charter. And a group charter contains the ideologies, the objectives, and the goals that the groups are driven by. And these ideologies and the goals, in a way, are being developed by a leader. So the technical condition, we are talking about the emergence of a leader who gives justified ideas, who gives justified ideologies, who make members conscious of the fact that what their interests are at risk. So that is a technical condition. That the fact that there is a crazy group and then there's a latent interest, technical condition alone that does not suffice for there to be conflict in the society, or for what? For the interest of the people to shift from the latent to what? To manifest, for the group to move from crazy group to what? To interest group. So that means that technical condition alone, the emergence of a leader with justifying ideologies alone does not suffice for there to be conflict. Another condition that must also be met is the political condition of the organization. The degree of freedom with which the people in the group are given to exercise or to embark on their interest. That in a situation whereby there is autocracy, in a totalitarian regime, whereby people are not allowed to express themselves, you could see that that any sense of trying to question the status quo, you are going to be dealt with by the leader. In that particular sense, there is the less likelihood for group conflict to emerge. So this means that there could be a technical condition, all right, but then if the degree of freedom with which the group are going to embark on their interest is limited, then conflict is not going to emerge. For example, you could see that the demonstration that was embarked on, you could see that the people who were in the demonstration were being stopped by police. They were being stopped by soldiers. At that particular time, they were not given enough room to express themselves. They were not given enough room to fight for their interests. And at that particular time, you could see that the conflict was limited. So the fact that there could be a technical condition and then there could be a political condition, whereby in a way there's democracy, whereby people are given the chance to express themselves, that alone does not suffice for there to be conflict. Another condition that must be met is the social condition, the degree of communication between members of the group. Now this talks about what? This talks about the topography. This talk about the nearness, how members are able to communicate. This talk about proximity between members. That a group that is scattered all over in a way is more likely to be a crazy group. But then this premise, in a way, or this oversimplification or overemphasis, in a way, is being questioned because of the advent of technology, a situation whereby we have created an efficient way of communicating. So according to Ralf Dharendorf, the social condition, we are talking about the degree of communication. So then he said that the degree of proximity in a way would determine how members are close, how members are knit together, how members are closer to each other would determine the degree of communication. So according to Ralf Dharendorf, these three conditions must be available before a group's interest will move from a latent interest to a manifest interest, or before a group can move from a quasi group to an interest group. Conflict intensity, violence, conflict. Now, Ralf Dharendorf also spoke about conflict intensity. And then with his idea of conflict intensity, he was talking about the degree of involvement of members in the conflict. the behavior expenditure of the members in the conflict. And we are talking about the violence of conflict. We are talking about the means with which members engages in the conflict. So for Ralf Dharendorf, he linked the intensity of conflict to superimposition. Now, when we talk about superimposition, we are talking about the degree with which a social status or with which an authority is being recognized in different social settings. That a person will face a high superimposition if, in a way, wherever that he goes, he is considered as someone who does not exercise power. That a person will go to the family, that the family members will not treat the person as the person matter. The person will come to the workplace and the person's image is also trivialized. At that particular time, there's high possibility for the person to engage in conflict, for the intensity of conflict to be high. Because at that particular time, the person will be facing high level of superimposition. But then, in a situation whereby, for example, the president of Ghana, wherever the president of Ghana will go, he will be considered as the president of Ghana. So the degree with which we recognize a social status in different social settings would determine the intensity of conflict, would determine our involvement in conflict. That a situation whereby the president of Ghana, wherever that he goes, when he goes to US, wherever that he goes, he is considered as the president of Ghana. In a way, will boost his interest to protect his interest. That is intensity of conflict and superimposition. And then Ralf Dharendorf also spoke violence of conflict. That is the means with which we engage in the conflict. That according to Ralf Dharendorf, violence of conflict move from no violence to threat of violence and violence. That the situation whereby we use aggression. That according to Ralf Dharendorf, there's a direct relationship between deprivation, that is relative deprivation, and absolute deprivation. There's a direct relationship between deprivation and the violence of conflict. Now, let us also talk about some of the consequences of conflict. Consequences of conflict in the perspective of Ralf Dharendorf. That according to Ralf Dharendorf, conflict causes structural change. That conflict, in a way, changes the hierarchy in the society. That if conflict causes structural change, it means that the interest of the subordinate class could be taken into consideration. Now, there could also be a situation that because of the conflict, members of the subordinate class would be recruited in the dominant class. And when that happens, there's a high level of possibility that the person will forget about the subordinate class. For example, we have a lot of politicians that were part of the subordinate class, but then because they were recruited in the dominant class, when they got there, they tried to do things for their own interest. They forgot about the interest of the subordinate class. So those are the consequences of conflict according to Ralf Dharendorf. Now, Ralf Dharendorf also linked the structural change of conflict to radical and sudden change. Now, radicalness refers to the extent of change, and suddenness also refers to the speed of change. And then according to Ralf Dharendorf, there is a direct relationship between intensity of conflict and radicalness of conflict. There's a direct relationship between intensity of conflict and radicalness of conflict. That the more that what we engage in conflict, the more there is going to be change in what? In our social structure. And then it also linked the suddenness of change to the what? To the violence of conflict. That you could see that the way a situation whereby a more violent form is taken, whereby guns and weapons are used, you could see that it causes a sudden change on the social structure. You could see that lives are going to be taken. You could see that it destroys the economic institution. So Ralf Dharendorf actually argued that the violence of conflict in a way is directly related to the suddenness of change, that the speed of change. So that is Dharendorf's idea of radical change and sudden change. Now, this brings us to the end of our session of Ralf Dharendorf. Please, just as you do, kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel if you have not subscribed yet. And then please anticipate for more videos as time goes on. Thank you very much. Please don't forget to share, subscribe, and like, and also at the same time comment on this YouTube video. Thank you very much for listening and watching and for subscribing. Bye bye.